A child no older than 10 and had to endure terrible things. If he didn't do the task well, he would get punched. However, once he had finished it all, he was tied up again and thrown into the lava lake with encouraging words, all for his benefit. After putting forth so much effort, he had finally achieved everything and was qualified to depart, leaving the promised land of wandering heroic souls. They had told him everything they knew and pleaded with him to be brave and prevent them from failing into oblivion. The boy laughed and fled, not wanting to return to this place. He entered the spatial portal and his soul returned to his actual body. However, this body was extremely weak and even paralyzed, making it difficult for him to even open his eyes. The kingdom of Ron, and he was Prince Davy Ron of this kingdom. The first prince born would naturally be protected and born with a silver spoon. From an early age, despite being a prince, Davy did not understand anything. He believed that his happy childhood would continue with his mother for the rest of his life, but one day, a cup of poison killed her, and everything about him was gone. Davy first believed that all he needed to do was be filial, but when he discovered that he would be the target of many people because he was a member of a royal family, he understood that he needed to be powerful in order to make any changes. Davy smiled, thinking that was syrupy enough. His goal now was to recover quickly. With the knowledge he had gained from all the heroes of the past, he would exact revenge on them one by one. When Davy first arrived in the spirit land, he cried uncontrollably, and a hero rushed to his side. The hero had heard Davy's proclamation to the other heroes and had congratulated him, but Davy ignored the hero because he was still getting used to this world and was wary of other people. They welcomed Davy joyfully at first, but when they realized he was only a 10-year-old child, their faces changed. Davy couldn't take it any longer. He didn't want to come here either. Davy was upset. The hero smiled and stated that those individuals seemed shocked to have to teach a 10-year-old child because they were all specialists on top of the world. They had their own pride in having to do this, and since they were now a family, the hero decided to take responsibility for Davy. The hero, who introduced himself as Hercules, seized Davy by the neck, claiming to be a survival specialist, that he would train Davy from now on, and that he would take Davy away regardless of Davy's opinion. Back to reality. It had been a few days since Davy had woken up, and the only person in the entire castle who cared about him and entered this room was this maid. Davy told himself that this was enough, and after he waited for the maid to leave the room, he began to stand up. At least he could still sit, but his body had actually grown too weak. To find out what day it was, Davy grabbed the calendar from the table and watched in annoyance. It had been 6 years since he was hurt by someone else. He couldn't let it happen again, and to protect himself, he needed to recover quickly. Davy squeezed his palm and started to use the power to heal his body, but nothing happened. Confused as to what was going on, he wondered how he could not use his powers. Davy, who was 10 years old, didn't perform well at first, but the heroes still saw potential in him. He could still be able to grow stronger through divine power, a power given only by God to the elect. Additionally, the hero Delphine, who was renowned as the girl accepted by God, was the one who taught Davy about this power. Of course, controlling the power was not easy. Delphine had to practice hard for hundreds of years to achieve the threshold. This was so infuriating since Davy's strength remained, but the problem was that his body had been paralyzed for 6 years, so it would take some time for him to use his powers and possibly even longer to heal this damaged body. Davy kept trying to move his body, but nothing happened. He was helpless. If he didn't move, he would die. However, at this very moment, the holy power was activated and Davy was thrilled. As a result, he was able to reluctantly regain his mobility, while the other skills waited for his body to heal before being performed. Davy took his first steps, walking towards the window. It had been a long time since he had seen the sun, and with all due respect, Davy shouted loudly as the maid entered the room, which startled Davy out. Soon after the family doctor arrived to examine him, the reigning queen and her 2 sons arrived as well. It was her eldest son, Carlos, who shot the arrow at Davy. Davy irritably warned them that this was an attempt to assassinate a member of the royal family, but she was not afraid because the investigation was over and they left right after. Davy utilized his powers frequently during this period, but they didn't realize that there appeared to be a difference in power. Whenever he recovered, he would return all they had done. It had been 2 weeks since Davy had returned, and he was doing well thanks to his divine strength as well as the magic taught by Sister Dvi. As Davy snapped his fingers, his entire body grew stronger. He was much stronger. Although Davy had only been able to eat porridge for the past 2 weeks, it was still better than nothing, so he asked his maid Aim to go get 10 more bowls for him. He ate well because magic made his digestion process go faster. After eating, Davy sat down to check the castle's finances. The castle had been occupied by previous kings, but he and Aim were now the only people residing there. Davy then turned to ask Aim what the budget was. Originally, there were roughly 6,000 gold coins, but now there were just 10 gold coins. Davy was expecting to receive 500 gold per month, but there were only 100 gold left, making him feel like he was losing money. Next was the salary Aim should have received. However, she only received 1/3 of what she should have. Davy was actually a little irritated because Amy was a good person who, for the past 6 years, had taken care of him and even used her personal money to take care of him. Amy was such a nice idiot that Davy laughed at her. In return for his kindness, Davy allowed Amy to take a portion of his salary, which she did not receive. Then there was the issue of calling. Davy did not expect Amy to call him Prince anymore. It was too foreign. Davy went on to lead Amy to the royal castle, which was really too flashy. Since Davy's mother had been harmed, his father had stopped caring about him. Davy could no longer regard his father as a father, and now that only Amy was by his side, he chuckled, hoping to get along with Amy. Davy went to the expenditure management office to inquire about this. The manager stated that adding a budget was tough. The employees here were even continually scrutinizing Davy. It appeared that their contempt for him was real. Davy sat down in annoyance and demanded angrily, "Clearly, I had to get 500 gold, but how the hell did I only receive 100 gold? The manager assumed that the lack of gold was necessary to maintain Davy's castle, which just made Davy angrier because the castle was full of weeds on the floor and walls that were full of cracks. As confronted with this question, the manager became terrified. Davy's stare was as serious as that of a true king. The manager became worried and had to explain to Davy that maintenance was done by the maintaining department, not by his department. Davy laughed and led Amy away after hearing this explanation because he was fairly certain that this would continue to happen, and he secretly thought that the manager should misappropriate the money as long as he could. The servants in the castle soon left after Davy became strong, but Ames still stayed to take care of him because he needed to get strong quickly. Davy then asked Ames to bring him a sword. Of course, he wouldn't slash people with it. Instead, he would slash those who didn't deserve to be human. If he killed the nobles in an unusual state, they might accuse him of being insane and have him killed right away. So he had to demonstrate his normality to prevent that from happening. Davy brought a wild boar home, which astonished Aemon, and then used the hero Hercules' survival skills to peck this pig. The queen summoned the Moon Society assassin Shirley to the queen's castle that evening. As the queen observed, she became more aware of Davy's unusual behavior. According to Shirley, Davy woke up unchanged, but the queen had a bad feeling and had to send someone to keep an eye on him all the time. The hardest part of using magic was allowing it to infuse all of the blood in the body, which was as difficult as driving a thread through hundreds of needles. Nonetheless, Davy managed to control that with the help of the goddess Gia. In the days that followed, Davy returned to his daily life. Aim and Davy had become closer, and after Aim left for work, Davy found a quiet place to begin practicing magic. He used a breathing technique from Odin's body, in which simply breathing could produce mana. It was an advanced technique that, if everyone here knew about it, would be revolutionary. But Davy had no intention of sharing it with anyone. The simple part had been completed. Davy had accumulated a sizable amount of mana thanks to his peaceful days. The next step was the hardest, creating magic circles. Priests could not use magic, shamans couldn't use divine powers, and prophecy was the only power those two could have. Nevertheless, after thousands of years of practice, Davy had mastered all three types of power. Normally, for magicians to use magic, they had to draw a circle into their hearts. But because Davy had divine power inside of him, if he did it incorrectly, his heart would stop beating immediately. As a result, he was only able to draw the magic ring in a different spot. He would draw on all the blood vessels to prevent the heart from colliding, which was both reasonable and dangerous. It was almost like fixing his entire body, and there was no second chance. Davy was extremely focused. He had been practicing this for thousands of years, and it had to be successful. Aim was anxious because she hadn't seen Davy return until that evening. If the prince had any problems, it would be difficult for her to survive. At this very moment, Davy returned just in time for him to lean on Aim and pass out. When Davy awoke, he discovered Aim still asleep next to him. He had collapsed unexpectedly the day before because he was so fatigued, but he had already successfully painted the entire spell ring on his body. The three powers were all running in his blood, and now utilizing magic had become too easy. A finger was enough to do things that regular people couldn't. 5 months later, Davy's life was still peaceful, but 3 months earlier, someone used to frequently bring food to his castle. At first, Davy assumed this was part of the queen's plan, but after thinking, he realized that she had no reason to do so. Of course, if he cast magic around the castle, he could easily spot that person, but they preferred to keep their distance, so Davy stopped being curious. The queen's henchmen arrived at the castle at this precise moment to examine Davy, but because of his poor skills, he didn't realize that Davy's body had almost fully recovered. Instead, he believed that Davy's body was too weak to use his divine healing power, which made Davy laugh since he thought that this power could heal all of his wounds. That man spoke to the prince as if he were a subject, which caused Aemon to speak up to remind him, but he instantly slapped Aemon, knowing how his servant dared to speak to him. Standing in front of the prince, but he feared nothing, calmly repressing Aemon as the check was over, he presumed Aemon was his servant, so at the very least she had to go out and see him off. Davy didn't say anything. He simply reminded Aim to see the man off. As soon as the man left, he pinned Aim against the wall and warned her that he held Davy's life in his hands, so the girl had better not offend him. Davy then asked Aim why she was so loyal to a disabled prince. Davy's body instantly became cold upon seeing what had just occurred, and his fury and infinite emptiness filled his mind. His self-esteem was too high for him to ignore this. Master Define had warned Davy that he would look scary if he let his anger overpower him, but it didn't matter anymore. Davy grabbed the sword and rushed straight for that physician, who at the time was still bragging to Aim that he was the queen's henchman, so no one would dare to oppose him. Suddenly, Davy appeared right behind that man, frightening him. Davy aimed his sword at that man's face and turned to ask Aim what punishment criminals generally face. Aim glanced at Davy, horrified, and said that blasphemy against the royal family would be executed on the spot. Davy stabbed the man in the neck right away. The man was frightened and warned Davy that the queen would not let this go. Davy then beheaded the man and thanked him for the reminder, but he was confident that the following would soon be gone. Soon after, the queen went to Davy and smacked him in the face, accusing him of killing the church's disciple. This made Davy laugh, and he pondered when the royal had been more disregarded than a disciple. The queen then started cursing Davy's mother, which angered him and caused him to emit a bit of murder. As a result, the maids rushed to protect the queen. Even though he didn't say it directly, Davy gently reminded the queen that attempting to kill a member of the royal family meant committing a crime of death. The queen grew pale all over and wasn't sure if Davy knew Carlos was the culprit. She then used the excuse of being tired to leave immediately, but not before Davy threatened her that the castle's condition was a bit old and she should restore it before something horrible leaked out. As soon as the queen arrived at the palace, she was so humiliated by Davy's words to her that she smashed everything in her way. She then made the decision to kill Davy. In the days that followed, news of Davy's murder of the queen's henchman priest spread throughout the palace. Most people there were on the queen's side and thought Davy had mental issues. However, Davy didn't care what others said, for at least he had someone beside him who trusted him. Aim grew even closer to Davy after witnessing him kill a man right in front of her eyes. She was such a good person, making Davy giggle. At this point, the royal butler Besfus led those who had embezzled public funds to Davy on the queen's orders. Embezzling public funds was a serious crime, and according to royal law, those people's entire clan would be killed, but it was up to Davy to give the order. At this point, Davy mentioned some recent rumors that he was bloodthirsty, so he planned to check it out with them. Those were so terrified that they fell to their knees and begged Davy's forgiveness, but Davy did not hesitate to send them all to prison, and 9 days later, they would be executed. Then it came to the servants. The butler Besfus would promptly reorganize the vacant positions. Davy then promoted Aim to the rank of senior maid to further reward her. Before going out, Besfus reminded Davy that someone was coming to see him. Davy knew that this elderly guy was the one who supplied food to his castle every day, but when Davy addressed it, Besfus claimed not to know anything, but happily, other than Aim, Besfus was on Davy's side. As Aim declared that the second princess and the fourth prince were paying him a visit, the door was immediately opened, and the second princess, Winley, rushed in, causing Davy to fall to the ground. The fourth prince then entered and lifted Winley off Davy. Cryonis Al Round, the reigning king of the Round Kingdom, had 3 wives, the current queen, Linus Buriet, and 2 other wives, Alice and Anisha, respectively. While Alice sided with the queen, Anisha chose to remain on the neutral side and not join them. Davy's half-brothers, Winley and Baris, were the children of Anisha. As twins, Winley was born 5 minutes after Baris, so she had to be the younger sister, which made her refuse and fight Baris all the time, but at least they were the only siblings in the house that listened to Davy's words. Then they sat down together for a talk. When Davy was killed 6 years ago, Winley and Baris were immediately sent to a remote area, and Tana, the eldest son of Anisha, was conspired with by the queen to be sent to another country. At the time, Winley and Baris were only 8 years old, making it dangerous for them to remain in the palace. Now that they were older, they could return. After Davy mentioned seeing their father, those two said they had already done so, making it a bit surprising that Davy hadn't. Davy laughed and said it was okay because he would eventually meet his father. The reason the twins were here today was because a sword competition was about to take place in Pelisti. Baris extended an invitation to Davy to take part. It had been a while since Davy had been outside, so this would be his chance to see the wonderful world outside. Davy immediately laughed and accepted the offer. How could he refuse the twins' kind wishes? Meanwhile, at the king's castle, the butler Besfus told the king about Davy, saying that after waking up from a coma, Davy was like someone else and had grown to the point where even Besfus recognized him. Owing to the queen's orders, workers were sent to the castle to make speedy repairs, so this area had to become a better place to live. Then Davy accompanied the twins to a sword competition. This competition was part of a major congress that attracted people from all over the world. In addition to Davy, his younger brother, Baris, also attended. If Baris won this competition, Carlos' position would be shaken. However, Queen Linus still allowed Baris to participate, as if she were certain Brays would fail. The king appeared to greet them at this time. He had avoided Davy for the previous 6 months. However, as soon as they met, the king turned back and walked away. Although Davy looked closely, he was unable to detect the heroic aura of the king. Probably the king was too old. Prince Boris was escorted by a group under the king's orders, and the king also instructed the royal cavalry to follow them to ensure their safety. The three siblings continued to talk and drink together, and Davy even brought a bottle of relic wine that his mother had left to enjoy with his siblings. This made Boris realize how much Davy had changed, as he had previously refused to let anyone touch his mother's relics. They had fun until the evening, when the group camped for a night and there was still a day left for them to reach the kingdom of Polisti. Boris threw the drunken Winley away, then asked Davy, not knowing whether Davy remembered, but camping in the woods had been Davy's dream. Boris remembered this wish, and today he helped Davy fulfill it. Davy was deeply touched by this. 6 years had gone by, and while some things had changed, many remained the same. Those two siblings were certainly people who could be trusted, and the moon was beautiful today to mark Davy's return. The Boris brothers recruited 5 squires to go with them, and 4 of them were well trained, so if nothing serious happened, it would be all right. But of course, Linus would not pass up such a fantastic opportunity to kill Davy. As soon as Davy leaped into the tree, he saw that there were approximately 20 assassins coming. It appeared that they were targeting his group while they were sleeping. Davy didn't like revealing his true identity so soon, but it didn't matter because these assassins wouldn't be able to inform Linus about it. Davy jumped down, gripping a branch to confront the assassins. Pegasus, who taught Davy swordsmanship, once stated that anything could become a weapon. It was merely an extension of the body, and understanding how to use anything, even a cloth, might kill people. Davy took the branch and began to attack the assassins, but they were so weak that Davy was a little down. After stopping for a moment, he asked the assassins something to get them to shut up, and then Davy raced over to beat them to death. This trip included 3 members of the royal family, so if they died, even the queen wouldn't be able to settle down. So why did she decide to bring the assassins here after all? Or was there another reason? Davy was a little confused. He slaughtered them all, leaving only 3, and told them to return and inform the queen that whatever she did, he would later take her by the neck. These 3 guys turned their heads to run, making Davy chuckle. The most crucial thing for an assassin was patience to wait for the opportunity. If they believed their opponent's words and turned their heads to run like this, they couldn't be assassins. Thus, Davy beat the 3 guys down. Having no choice, 2 men had to stay behind to stop Davy, so the other person could escape. Davy killed those 2 men, and the guy who fled was instantly killed by Davy when he snapped. This was a horrific spell that could instantly destroy souls. The queen of the castle also knew that the assassins were dead since Shirley had given them life ropes, but they had now broken. This angered the queen, who then turned to slap Shirley. There were 3 children and 5 guards present, but the 20 assassins who had been dispatched to kill them couldn't do it. What the heck was going on? Shirley instantly concluded that someone was assisting the princes. Yet the queen didn't care and told Shirley to find a way quickly before her contract with the Black Moon Order expired. By that time, royal power would have destroyed Shirley's guild. The following day, the 3 David brothers arrived in Poleli, a small but well-developed nation. The brothers came to the competition site, an arena where the soldiers had risked their lives but which this time was used to host other national representatives. There were a total of 8 nations represented at the Congress, and Round's representative was Boris. Davy took a closer look at Boris, who was young but incredibly talented. At this point, Winley mentioned that the Falan nation had a very powerful person who was known as the Sword Princess and was so well known for having the masterpiece Holy Sword in 8 nations. The Holy Sword, Davy hadn't heard of it in a long time. He and his 2 siblings entered the diner after viewing the arena, and they continued to talk about the Holy Sword. It was stated that the blade had its own consciousness and picked Alela Falan as its master. There was one more reason. Alela was so gorgeous that she became more famous. That evening was prom, and Aim prepared Davy to be so handsome to get there. As the Prince of the Round Empire, Davy had to be magnificent. Winley and Boris dressed up and ran to Davy. Davy immediately led Winley away, ignoring Boris. Looking around the spot of the ceremony for a while, Davy noticed that it seemed like all the participants, almost all young people, were present. Of course, there were chaperones around like him and Winley, but the most prominent individual there was Boris, who was surrounded by numerous girls. Winley received some attention as well, though not as much as Boris. Davy took Winley to dance with him, and while they were dancing, Winley felt bad for her brother. As if Davy hadn't had health issues, he probably would have taken part in this competition. Davy laughed at this because he didn't care about these things, and as he had been training for thousands of years, no one in this place was strong enough to confront him. All he wanted was to live in peace. Suddenly, a man came to greet Winley. Winley appeared to be getting very tired of this man, who then introduced himself as the 7th prince of the kingdom of Boltis when he saw Davy here. This man seemed to really enjoy Winley, as he kept reminding her to watch him compete, confident that he would win. Winley disregarded that man and dragged her brother away, but the man had had enough and tried to pursue Winley. However, Davy quickly grabbed that guy's hand to stop him from touching Winley, and thereafter advised the man to be aware that he was lucky that Davy hadn't broken his dirty hand. This irritated Valentine so much that he ripped out his gloves and threw them on the ground, daring Davy to a duel. At this point, the holy princess Elella entered, interrupting. She had watched from beginning to end. Valentina was seeking to regain his honor through a showdown, but given that he had ruined the party, did he have the right to do so? The hero with the holy sword had previously discovered the kingdom of Fallon, which had now become one of the 3 strongest kingdoms on the continent. Seeing Elella surprised Davy as he resembled his swordsmanship master, Haris, but Harris was clearly a man, which puzzled Davy. Elella began to scold Valetian for being excessively rude to a girl at the party, claiming that this demonstrated Valetian's lack of respect for those present, and that he had no right to reclaim his honor. Elella therefore demanded that Valetian apologize to Davy and Winley as long as he had the honor of a knight. However, with a man with such strong self-esteem as Valetian, he couldn't do that, so Davy chose to play with Valetian for a little while and accepted the battle. Elella was amazed and turned to tell Davy that this was a meaningless match and he didn't have to do that. Davy smiled, saying it was his decision, and that they would fight with wooden swords. Burrus hurried to Davy's side to warn him that even though Davy had regained his health, this was still a little too much for him. Davy patted his 2 younger siblings' heads and walked out onto the court. Seeing Davy appear like an amateur made Valentina think he would definitely win, reasoning that if Davy surrendered and apologized, Valetian would let it go. Davy laughed, claiming his actions would speak for themselves, and then he began to consider how to deal with this guy. He had only been out of his hospital bed for a year, so using this guy to demonstrate a little strength should be fine. Valentina was so certain that he stood for Davy to strike first, so Davy hurried forward and swung his sword straight to the ground. This blow really distracted attention. Davy then landed a punch directly at Valetian's chin, sending him to the ground and causing the others surrounding him to start whispering. In a fit of rage, Valentina charged at Davy, not wanting to lose face any longer. As he struck, Valetian felt very bewildered. It was obvious that Davy's sword posture was very strange and didn't have any power at all, but how the heck could Valentina not hit even 2 blows? Despite this, Davy gave Valetian a shot straight to the head, causing him to sit down. The people nearby were likewise surprised, wondering whether this was Valetian. They believed even this duel was for fun, but being utterly overwhelmed like this was so humiliating. Valetian yelled angrily, as Davy had predicted, and it was for this reason that Davy had learned the drunken swordsmanship of a man named Doc Goju. Mr. Hares was so fascinated by it that he developed his own sword style, but both he and Doc Gob Jun had to admit that this style was too harsh and advised Davy to only use it on the bottom opponents. Because of how hard this style of swing was, or was it because it was sharp? No, it wasn't. This style of fighting was designed to manipulate opponents. It wasn't meant to kill them, just humiliate them in front of the crowd. And since there were so many nobles present at this particular time, it was indeed very effective to annoy Valetian right there. Despite Valetian's best efforts, Davy was able to deflect all of his blows. Furious and unconcerned with what others thought, Valetian put mana into his sword and declared that this would be a fight for survival. Davy wasn't terrified, but he didn't want to show any more strength since he would look suspicious if he did. Valetian charged at him, his sword splitting the air, but Davy was beneath him. In a second, Valetian fell to the ground, and Davy placed his sword up next to Valetian's face. Davy rubbed his head and said he had fallen by accident. Davy's movements had been so quick that nobody could have seen what he had just done, but because Valetian was on the ground, Davy won. Prince Valetian performed such a bad match that everyone was disappointed. All eyes were on Davy, who had been unwell in bed for a few months and was suddenly able to overcome Prince Valetian, which was perplexing. When the party was finished and they were in the car, Burrus was quite concerned about his brother. Burrus had already seen Valetian's strength at the last gathering, and to be honest, before the match began, Burrus didn't see his brother having any chances, which made Davy laugh and say that he had just been lucky to win. Burrus was still concerned, hoping Davy wouldn't do it again, but Davy grabbed Burrus's hand and used a bit of force to break him in pain, hoping Burrus wouldn't think of his brother as a patient any longer. Winley laughed, saying at least her brother was great. Davy grinned at Valetian, who would never understand why he was defeated. Valentina was madly smashing things at his palace. Born the most gifted prince and attractive general, he thought there was nearly no one in the world that could match him until he saw Winley at a meeting that drew him in. Of course, part of the reason Valentina followed Winley was to make Burrus fall at his feet. He had negotiated favorably with Queen Linus and was just waiting for the king to approve the marriage. However, now that he had to put up with this, Valetian hurriedly smashed all the servants out and vowed to kill Davy. At this point, a black shadow appeared and introduced itself as Sherio, requesting to help Valentina kill his enemy. Sherio moved closer to Valetian, and Valetian acted as if he were being brainwashed by Sherio, sitting still for Sherio to continue brainwashing and leaving everything to her to handle. The following day, the fencing festival officially began. A large crowd had gathered to watch. Davy was also there, but Barris's turn to play was in the afternoon, and there was fencing in the morning. Since he didn't want to waste time watching amateurs, he left using the excuse that he had a stomach ache. Winley had set up a nice spot for her and her brother to watch. Davy really had a stomach ache this morning from the terrible digestibility of the holy power. He had to use the restroom frequently and felt a little embarrassed around his sister. So Davy wasn't sure if he should keep using this power. Barris was out on the field and everyone appeared to be very welcoming. Davy had seen the roster for this match, which appeared to be tense now that Barris's opponent was Valetian. It was just a festival, so it was not allowed to kill or use mana in this match. Winley was a little concerned for Barris because Valentina would probably take his anger out on him. Davy grinned, not needing to worry as Barris had insurance. Since yesterday's match, Davy had read Valetian's sword path and he couldn't be as strong as Barris. The match began with the two sides being very evenly matched, which surprised Davy greatly. How could this be? He wondered if this guy, after yesterday's loss, had improved his strength. The time was too short for him to get to this point, so it couldn't be that. Suddenly, Davy had the sense that Barris was in urgent danger, so he stood up. Barris still didn't know anything. All he felt was respect for Valetian's strength. Valetian's movements were also odd, so Barris had to be careful. When the time was right to end, Barris grabbed the sword and slashed at Valetian. But Valetian didn't bother to dodge, so Barris had to retrieve his sword. At this point, Valetian changed the blade to red and stabbed directly into Barris's chest. Barris was stunned and unable to dodge it. If so, he would die. The night before, to prepare for the match, Barris had practiced a lot. Davy came to support his brother. Davy has defeated Valetian, but Barris is still not satisfied. He wants to defeat him with his own hands. Davy was beside him, watching his brother practice swordsmanship, moving smoothly with no unnecessary movements. It seems that Barris has a very gentle flow of mana, so Davy wants to help his brother a little. This is a method that is sure to make an uproar in the world, but Barris is my brother, so Davy doesn't regret doing anything. Davy reached out and grabbed Barris by the shoulder with the excuse of giving her a massage. One man's mana stimulated another's mana, mixing them and forcing them to work. It looks easy, but this is the method of breaking the rules of this world. Thanks to this insurance, Valetian's sword couldn't reach Barris. Something called a mana shield appeared to protect Barris. People in the entire arena were amazed at this. It was a skill that only a high-level knight could master. How the hell could a kid as young as Barris use it? Winley excitedly turned around to show Davy that he had disappeared. Although the mana shield was able to block the Valetian's fatal blow, but the falling to the ground is still Barris. It couldn't block all the damage, causing Barris to spit blood just in time for the game to stop. Everyone turned to blame him for daring to break the rule with the intention of killing his opponent. This is an act that promotes war. Valetian failed the contest. Not stopping there, the host country Pettis will also send a letter of complaint to the king of his country, Voltus. Valetian's subordinates quickly ran to advise the prince or explain something. This must be a misunderstanding. Valetian killed the servant instantly to everyone's astonishment. Everyone in the arena was too scared to run away. Valetian was now as crazy as a monster. The soldiers wanted to stop him, but that wasn't enough. They had to call in more reinforcements. Davy was at Barris, the boy happily showing off to his brother about the mana shield he had just made. This kind of advanced skill can't be done by everyone, partly because Davy helped his brother awaken his strength, and the rest is due to the natural talent available in him. Barris did a great job. Now go to sleep. Davy helps his brother to sleep. Let someone else take him to take care of him. And he alone went to the Valetian. Daring to touch his brother had to pay the price. The soldiers are still trying to stop this guy, but it seems to be unsuccessful. He is too strong for them. He can't do anything but buy more time to move the audience to a safe place. And the shield was about to last, and at this point, Davy stepped into the field, surprising everyone. Winley also discovered his brother down there. Looking at Valetian, Davy's frantic appearance, did not know what was wrong with him. It was not normal to change so much overnight. As soon as he saw Davy named Valetian rushing to attack him, Davy was still thinking about how to make him look good. Suddenly, Winley ran up to Davy, startling him. If she went any further, she would be in danger. At this moment, the princess of the Holy Sword, Elena, appeared, grabbed Davy by the neck and threw it behind. The Valetian madly rushed to kill all the soldiers around. Elena changed the angle around to his right. She swung her sword with a single hit that sent him flying. Davy just sat there staring at Elena. Isn't this stealing your credit? The Valetian was still able to get up after the powerful blow just now, not giving him a chance to rest. Valetian rushed to punch and kick him repeatedly in the face. Valetian couldn't help picking her combo. After this combo, he finally sat still. Soldiers quickly ran to surround him. Davy sat silently watching Elena show how she seemed to have a little too much energy. Suddenly, Elena gritted her teeth and said a vampire that confused everyone. The soldiers had already tied the Valetian with chains, but Elena still charged at him. Suddenly, he got up and poked his heart with his hand, and he shouted the serum that the whole arena was filled with dust. The sight of only one blood red made Winley afraid to hug his brother and cry. Davy tried to comfort his brother. With him here, no one could harm his sister. Then Davy's holy power put Winley to sleep, and when she wakes up, she won't remember anything. However, currently controlling the holy power is still a bit difficult for Davy, so it takes a while to succeed. Winley had fallen asleep with the power of St. Davy using so she wouldn't be in any danger for the time being. Next is to deal with the Volition. The skill he just used is Blood Castle, as the name suggests. Weak people in the area of the skill area will be completely drained by it. Then transfer it all back to the skill user named Volition. The more people there, the stronger he becomes. Davy's current holy power is level 4, not enough to save everyone in this area. And Davy didn't intend to save them because he wasn't close, at least Bryce was taken away first, so there was no problem anymore. Davy jumped onto the field to find Volition. Now everyone was unconscious and let him show off his strength. Everyone was already unconscious. How the hell could Elena still be awake? This is a problem. Davy turned to look at Elena, who was awake but still had to put down his sword to get up. At least she was still very pretty in this state, so Davy stepped forward to help her out a bit. Elena was bewildered when Davy was okay, which was understandable because a year ago he was still sick and bedridden. Davy reminded her to wake up and then stepped back to let him handle it, but Elena wouldn't stop Davy. What they were facing was very dangerous. She had read in ancient books they were called vampires. Elena reminded Davy to quickly run away while she was still holding him, so believably different from what Elena had done yesterday. However, Davy sensed Elena's anger, as if meeting a sworn enemy. Just as Davy had speculated, as a child Elena had witnessed her mother's death at the hands of vampires. She never forgot that image. Elena swore her life to exterminate these vampires until her death. The name Valentina is no longer a humanoid. Not wanting to waste any more time, Davy immediately hit Elena on the back of the head. He put her in a corner with a reminder not to get in his way, just sit there and enjoy the performance. What if there were a few vampires? Davy was confident he understood them better than anyone. Moreover, the Volition is only an infected person, not a pureblood vampire, so he is much weaker than the purebloods. Volition rushed to attack Davy. He used his hand to push his fist aside. Os. Then it was his turn, and Davy put strength into his fist, aiming straight at his heart with just one punch, punching through his heart. The shockwave Davy emitted was so strong that the school walls collapsed, and Elena watched with wide eyes. Elena really didn't understand what just happened. Someone infected by vampires but unites. The mage couldn't even defeat her holy sword. How the hell was she beaten to death in one hit? Because a normal person can't even feel mana. Moreover, this guy was still a bedridden patient a year ago. After beating her badly, Valentina and Davy reached out and held out her hand in front of Elena. She thought he was coming to help her up, but thought it was wrong. It turned out that Davy had only borrowed the sword, embarrassing Elena and nowhere to hide. Her sword was broken, and I don't know what Davy borrowed it for, not a broken sword. Davy reached out and snatched the chain around her neck. Blacksmith Surtur, the blacksmith who forged the sword that saved the world, and many other precious weapons. In his hands, ordinary ore also became a valuable weapon. Surtur has forged a total of 12 treasured swords that are famous throughout the continent, among which there is one that stands out above all, called Calderas, that the sword god Horus used. During a time when Charis used it, the sword created a self, an ego letting the sword use its power at will, as well as fooling others like now it's just a piece of a chain. But when Davy took it, Calderas scolded him. Davy didn't care, and he squeezed the pendant so hard that it was forced to transform into a sword. This surprised Calderas. Not even its contractor Elena was able to do this. How Davy was going to use it, Davy reminded him to shut up and then slashed down with a powerful blow. He knew that there was a guy who was secretly watching them. At first he thought it was some vampire, but he didn't expect it to be a high-ranking maid. At first, Shirley thought that a master was trying to help humanity. Who would have thought it was the great Prince Round? Davy laughed too, surely surprised. He called her down and had to look up at her neck. She wasn't afraid, she just stood there, and Davy took her down with a sword. Shirley dodged to the side and landed on top of the statue's head. This was a chance for her to kill Davy for Queen Lily. Davy had killed Boltus, Valetian prince that might have caused a war, but thinking about it, Boltus was weak and wouldn't have dared to declare war. Saying it over and over again gave Davy a headache. If Shirley dared to stay, she must have been very confident that she could defeat him. If you want to do it quickly. It takes too long. Davy sat down and lamented. This angered Shirley, who immediately attacked Davy, who jumped on top of another statue to dodge. Followed by countless spikes, Davy was still able to dodge them all. Shirley is surprised by this ability of Davy, but after all, he is only human. Davy immediately burst out laughing. Isn't she serving as a servant to a human? Shirley went mad and attacked Davy madly. This is what Davy meant, and vampires are very difficult to kill. Because they are strong. Before returning, Mr. Harris taught Davy a very effective way to defeat them, make them angry, and then reveal a lot of loopholes. The higher the level of a vampire, the easier it is to make them mad. Dodge enough and Davy counterattacks, and she has a blood shield to protect her. She's so young and strong, she has the qualities to become a vampire lord. She can be killed right here. Davy rushed straight in front of Shirley. She was very confident because she had a shield that protected even the power of the sword god could not be penetrated. Davy laughed lightly, slashing through the shield, making Shirley unable to react. The attack was so terrifying that it surprised the sword. After all, who was Davy to be able to use its power? Davy advised them not to be curious about each other's pasts, because he knew too well that it was impossible for them to believe that he was a pupil of their first master. But Shirley seems to have run away. The blood skill has also stopped after the big explosion just now. However, those with this skill still couldn't escape death. Even if they escaped death, they would turn into a monster like Felician just now. The poisoned area will be purified after a few months if someone knows how to use purification magic level 6 or higher. Until now, the sword had examined Davy's body. It was extremely surprising to see 3 sources of energy in his body. There's no way a normal person can achieve this power. Enough small talk, it's time to deal with the consequences here. At first, Davy didn't intend to save the people here, but it was acceptable to save them to become stronger. Davy sat down and began to pray with clasped hands. Davy's line prayer holding his sword a bit confusing. It assumes that the gods are far from answering this prayer. This made Davy laugh. One day there were thousands of people praying. Everyone was the same, so it had to make a difference to make the gods curious. As for the fact that the sword thinks it can't save the people here, Davy has a way to just fill the life of the lost people with a greater power. The highest level holy skill that can only be used with the permission of the god. Davy's sanctuary read aloud the spell that the blood formed instantly disappeared after a flash of light. The sword god lost consciousness due to being exhausted by Davy. Davy also collapsed shortly after. Davy was unconscious for 2 days, making Winley worried. Seeing Davy awake, he jumped in and hugged his brother. She was very worried that Davy would not wake up again. While examining Davy, Winley discovered that there was a holy mark on his back. This made her think that Davy was the one who saved her from red bones. Davy quickly touched his back. The size of the holy seal was a bit large. He had never encountered this before during his time in the other world. Then Winley told Davy the whole thing. When the red mist cleared, everyone discovered Davy was in an area full of holy energy. On the back was engraved the holy seal, which made the whole kingdom shake. Fortunately, no one knew what Davy had done. Winley is very worried about his brother's health. Davy is very strong now, even stronger than before coming here. Because he used the power of the 9th level holy seal, the mana in his body has increased a lot. The hardest part is that the holy energy has also increased. Everything was fine and Winley left first. After using the power, a message board appears allowing Davy to see other people's information, just like in the game. He did not understand this. Suddenly, there was a voice that startled Davy. Hurriedly searched and discovered a small girl dancing at his feet. Her name is Berserk, whom Haris used to draw a lot. She is a demon lord, but there was a time when Berserk looked like a human. Haris was recruited to teach her swordsmanship. However, ironically, when the Great War with the demon race broke out, Berserk immediately suggested working together, and the holy seal on Davy's back was now a vessel for the Demon King's soul. Davy had heard the story of the Demon King from Master Haris, but he didn't expect the Demon King to be like this. Unlike the Demon Lord that humans imagined, Davy thought that after being sealed for so long, Berserk's soul would have disappeared, but who would have thought that she would be so stubborn? This made Berserk laugh. The Holy Sword's spirit at least left room for her to live in it, so it didn't matter. Only now did Berserk explain to Davy a little easier to understand. According to God's instructions, she was transferred from the Holy Sword to the Davy. The reason for this was because Davy used holy power. Berserk thought this move was not bad at all. She had been with the Holy Sword for too long, so she moved somewhere else to see the world. More out there. Berserk's only reason for trying to live that long was just to see the world. A few days later, the kingdom became very bustling. This should have been the festival to end the competition between the countries, but now it turned into a festival to welcome the arrival of a holy seal. Suddenly becoming a celebrity made Davy a headache. It annoys him that there are curious people who come to see the holy seal every day. It's not okay to stay here. So Davy decides to take his brothers and run away. Berserk reminds Davy this is not a good way because they are going to chase him anyway. Davy had already calculated that there would be one person to stop them, and this person was Princess Elena. As soon as she heard that Davy had run away, she ordered the guards to pursue him. Doing such a big thing, Davy couldn't help but prepare in advance. Leading the noble group was Duke Barrietta. He was different from the queen, who had a separate power in the palace. Dealing with both of these streams at the same time is a bit difficult, but that's okay. Davy has a way. Davy led the children back to the kingdom safely. Boris went to see his father and apologized. It's not his fault, so the king doesn't blame him. It's the Boltus kingdom's fault that caused the problem. Next, he also heard that Davy had received the Holy Seal, a blessing for their empire. The king boasted to the queen, who looked so bitter that she could only smile. The king called in Duke Barrietta. This is a big deal that can't be ignored so easily. Ask him to write a letter of complaint to the Union. After that, after the court, everyone left, but Davy was kept by the king. It's been a long time since you woke up and he didn't call you into the palace. The king wanted to know if Davy hated him. Davy replied bluntly there was no reason to hate. Davy wanted to see the king for a long time just to ask why he didn't save his mother. Davy was in the other world, but he never forgot the face of his mother before she died. She was poisoned by the current Queen Lin. But the king just ignored it. The king could only remind Davy to be king. At that point, Davy would be forced to make many choices just for the good of the kingdom, an answer that greatly annoyed Davy. It is said that children often look like their parents, but he declared that he will not be like him. There is no way he will throw away his family and leave the throne position to someone else and then walk away. Thanks to Berserk's status window powers, Davy knew at least he still missed his mother. At the Black Moon Guild's mansion, they heard the news of Shirley's disappearance, disappearing without a trace. In the past, the soldiers under her command were also lost like that, which caused the branch chief to have a headache. Suddenly at this time, a gentleman spoke up. He thought that Shirley's strength was only there, so she could not complete the task. So he will personally bring Shirley back and reap Prince Davy's head. The branch manager didn't stop him. This confidence only brought death. Because everyone who has come into contact with Shirley knows that she is dangerous. If her skills are ranked 2, then no one will be ranked 1. Shirley's disappearance was too virtual. This guy had a bad feeling that he was about to pack up and run when Davy appeared. He pushed him down on the table to threaten a bit. If you want to live, it's best to listen to what he says. Davy asked him to give him all the information about Count Barrietta and evidence of embezzlement of his funds. This is confidential information not everyone has. The leader is resistant. Davy gives him a little more pressure. He was afraid that he would turn all green with the strength of Davy, so he gave it all up. Davy took the loose documents up to the roof to see, but it seemed that this was a fake, that even the other guy was fooled. Regardless, the real information is definitely in this guild. Just finding out can eliminate the Earl's faction. Davy won't kill him. He wants to play fair. At this time, Berserk was curious about Davy's wish, wishing that Davy only wanted a place to return to his family. He doesn't want to be king because kings are never free and revenge is only part of the process, not Davy's real purpose, so he decides to build himself a place worth living. Being the one who received the divine seal, Davy was surely the great pride of the kingdom.